second win of the November internationals against Fiji on Saturday went some way to restoring the good vibes around Andy Farrell's side. Gus McCarthy and Cormac Isashukwu impressed on their debuts, while it was also a big day for Sam Prendergast, who made his first Ireland start. On tonight's episode of the Left Wing Podcast, we will discuss all the talking points that came out of Saturday afternoon, as well as look ahead to this weekend, which sees Joe Schmidt return to the Aviva Stadium with Australia. I'm Will Slattery and delighted to be joined in studio by Luke Fitzgerald and on the line by Cian Tracey. And Luke, are you kind of comfortable in your new confines? We've moved from one studio to another. Hopefully there's no dip in quality.
Yeah, I'm pretty adaptable from my Joe Schmidt days. One of his favourite things. Looking forward to it. Sounds good. Cameras everywhere, which I'm not sure I'm unbelievably pleased about, but it looks like they're all kind of around head height. So
well, one thing I'd warn you both about is, like, one of the features of this studio now is for the YouTube listeners, our burgeoning viewers, is that we're all going to be on screen the whole time. So be cognizant if someone's making a very stupid point, not to like really wear that in your face. I'm probably talking to myself here more than.
I was going to say it's important when you're talking, but keep that in mind, Cian.
Yeah, well, I've gone for the home studio anyway, just to be safe.
Yeah, well, you're still going to be up on the big screen with the rest of us. Cian, I mentioned there in the intro the good vibes that I thought Saturday maybe restored a bit. Obviously, it was only Fiji, but we've been there before when Ireland didn't play well against Fiji. Andy Farrell wasn't happy. A lot of players haven't really played much international rugby since, whereas this was pretty different. As I mentioned, Gus McCarthy had a very strong debut. Isashukwu was good. Sam Prendergast, who I'm sure we'll talk a good bit about in this show, was running the show from the off. What did you just overall make of it? And do you think it was an important kind of, a feel-good victory after some of the negative vibes after the first two weekends?
I'm liking the narrative that you're building, Will, the feel-good vibes. I thought it was very enjoyable. I think, look, you would have to caveat whatever we say tonight about how well Ireland played and the young players by how poor Fiji were, and they were really disappointing. 17 penalties conceded. They never really gave themselves a chance. Some of their defending was really poor, but all that said, like you touched on, Will, in the past when Andy Farrell has made changes, it hasn't been as cohesive as we saw last weekend. And I think, like, on further reflection, I think it is even more positive from the sense that Andy Farrell, and we discussed this quite a bit on the show, that he's come out and, by saying that we don't have hundreds of players like South Africa do or wherever else. And you were kind of getting a bit worried, but it just goes to show that if you're throwing younger guys in, they can step up to the mark. And look, that doesn't mean one good win over a side like Fiji doesn't mean that the Irish pipelines, the systems are all perfect by any means, but it was definitely very, very encouraging as a whole. I thought the senior players were excellent as well in terms of guiding the likes of Isachukwu. You had Josh van der Fleer and Caelan Doris in the back row. Thought Isachukwu was very good. He had that line-out steal. Disappointed to have the try ruled out. He probably didn't have as many eye-catching moments as we've probably come to expect from him in an Ulster jersey. But as a debut goes, I thought it was very impressive. He was probably just outshone by Gus McCarthy, who I have to say, I thought he was excellent. For a 21-year-old who is still in the Leinster Academy to step up like that was seriously, seriously impressive. I think Ireland have, once again, another brilliant hooker on their hands. Going to be interesting to see sort of how that pans out in Leinster with the backlog there. Another, I suppose, topic that we've discussed quite a bit. So all in all, Will, I thought it was a very good day at the office, and I thought it was timely for the reasons like I outlined there in terms of Andy Farrell maybe, casting doubt on the quality of players, or not the quality of players, but certainly the number of young players coming through. I thought it was very encouraging from that sense.
Isashukwu also made a very good covering tackle on the prop just in the opening stages. I know it was a prop, but he's a pretty quick guy and he was galloping off into the corner before Isashukwu it got him to ground. Anything that you want to jump in from what Cian said? I thought there was a good few interesting talking points to come out of the game, considering it was very one-sided and it was the game of the window that Ireland were probably expected to win the easiest. But I do think Cian touched on a few things there, and I'll bring up a few things later. But what did you think after watching that? What jumped out at you?
I thought it was Fiji. Thought they were pretty poor.
Well, their discipline was absolutely shocking.
Well, I thought it was, but I also thought the referee shafted them on a number of occasions. I think that was a red card for Prndergast. I don't think it was there. I heard a lot of people talking about it being kind of slow-mo and it looked worse, and that does happen, but I still think I couldn't see anything that really defended him. Thought he took the shoulder, which kind of protects yourself, so straight away you lose my sympathy vote there. And I think when you hit the guy in the head, like I just feel like it's I just couldn't believe that she got that one wrong.
Well, it's the bunker that reviewed it, to be fair.
Yeah, but both got it wrong. You know, I thought it was a straight red anyway. I'm not sure why you need to go to the bunker for that one. It's a safer play, that's fine. So it's not all on her, which is fine. But I think the whoever was in the TMO box reviewing, I still thought it was a red card. I thought that was a bad decision. So I thought Fiji could be a little bit aggrieved at that.
I thought the red card is because we might as well get into it now since you brought it up. Do you not like the reasoning they gave? Excuse me, was kind of a lack of force in the challenge, which I did think in watching the replay. Like there's very little behind the shoulder. Like I agree with you that like the action.
What's he doing there? And then why does he tuck the arm?
Oh, that's all.
Oh, like it's all like so.
But if there's very little force,
how do we measure the force? The guy goes down. He's 6'6" or whatever, 6'5" kind of guy, big fella, goes down in a look, whatever you say, he went down easy enough, but he was still hitting the head on the way down. And I don't know, it's tricky. Yeah, like
very lucky.
I thought it was very lucky, regardless.
He said that the technique he's doing there, or the lack of, like, is in what he's doing.
He tucks his arm,
turning his shoulder into the face, like that ought to be a red. But I do actually.
It's actually a natural position to get into when you're about to have a collision with a bigger guy. But I think. I still think you could try and hold him. You could try and you could do something to try and mitigate. You could put the hands up to kind of push him off when you're not going to be tackling him when the ball's gone past you. That kind of way. So there's lots of things you could do rather than tuck the arm. And I just thought we were a little bit lucky there. I also thought there was a good few ones where Fiji had looked like they'd got a poach, and I thought the referee was just a little bit slow to give them pens. I thought there was a bit of that going on as well. So. Yeah, that side of it, but I thought Fiji were very poor. I mean, defensively they were awful. I thought it was kind of easy enough to break them down once we went through a number of phases. I thought they, like the crossfield kick, beautiful bit of skill by Prndergast. Like he gets it into that position to kick really quickly and the crossfield kick, but he's in like acres of space, which can happen there. But if you're going to leave someone that much space, it means you've got to come off the line like unbelievably hard. So there's no way he should get that amount of time on the ball. To get two passes away that close to the line is really, really poor for an international team. And some of the tries were pretty soft. So yeah, that was really the main takeaway of the game for me. What I would say was, in terms of the individuals, I think Izuchuku was outstanding. I really thought he looked like a guy. He looked like an international player to me. All his involvements were nice and tidy for the most part. He looks strong. He looks like he's built for international rugby. He'd be a lovely line-out option for you at that 6. Now, whether he starts, I don't know, but he could be a great bench option because, if you were stuck, you could put him on the row as well. And I just thought he was neat and tidy around the pitch and made some, like, every time he was in contact, he looked strong. He looked like he was, and that's a tough thing to do, by the way, against, the Fijians. There's some serious athletes he was playing against. I thought he was really good. I thought Byrne was good in the row. I like Byrne in there. I think that's probably his position now. I don't know. I think he can play 6, but I think he's probably a second row now. Earlier in his career, I might have said 6. But I think that's his best position. And then you picked from McCarthy and Ryan. So I thought he was decent as well. I thought McCarthy was good, but I thought the throwing was, a little bit suspect, which you'd expect. Look, it's a huge amount of pressure. He's still an academy player. I thought there was loads around the pitch that you'd say, yeah, look, that guy's a bit of a player. Similar to the other two Leinster players, I would say, in a lot of respects. Wasn't he, in that the throwing maybe leaves a little bit to be desired? But I think the Ireland line-out is probably on a whole is maybe is not as smooth. It hasn't been as smooth for a while.
That's not just qualifying.
No,
considering the other hookers have struggled there too.
Exactly. But it's important to say, that's probably a less organised line-out that he's playing against. Fiji don't necessarily have as much time together as a team as some of the other teams you come up against. If you think about New Zealand and Argentina, who've come off the championship, like they just be a bit more used to each other. They'd have a defensive line-out in place. They'd just be more settled, say, than Fiji's line-out. So it's probably a more difficult proposition, I think, to throw in against them. So that's important to note as well. But he definitely looks like he's a guy who needs to be playing some more rugby. Like he looks like he's physically built for it. Some lovely, bits of play around the pitch. The offloads for the tries and things like that were nice bits of play. And what else? Thought Henshaw was excellent. He was brilliant. And yeah, Prndergast is obviously the big talking point. I'm not sure whether do we want to get into it. I've been talking for a while, but
yeah, let's leave it for 1 minute. I just want to jump into Cian and get your opinion on the red card challenge first, Cian. Like obviously we discussed it there. What did you think of it?
I thought Luke was just going to go through all the talking points there. And
The show is over. We've touched on everything. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening, everyone.
Once I get going, Cian, sorry.
I'm only joking. I would agree pretty much with everything that Luke said. I thought he was very, very lucky. Yeah, like the officials ruled that it wasn't a high degree of danger, but I think when you go into a challenge like that with your arm tucked and catch a guy in the head, I think you're walking a tightrope there, basically. And look, I was the one who asked Mick Byrne, the Fiji head coach, about it afterwards, and he made the point that he's wearing a green jersey, so it stays a yellow card. And I think there's a lot of people, certainly judging by the reaction I got to that tweet, would agree. And what I would say is, if a Fijian player did that to Sam Prendergast or did that to an Irish player, I think we'd be up in arms about it as well. So, look, on a human level, you were obviously happy that he wasn't sent off, like a 21-year-old making his first test start. But I thought he was very, very lucky. I know it's been kind of mentioned that last week we were at a press conference with him, and he was asked about, his defence, and it was put to him that was he a bit slight, and maybe wasn't the kindest way to ask the question. It wasn't me who asked it. I would throw that in, but you could see that he was bristling at the suggestion, and obviously it's been a bit of a theme around his defence and stuff, and it wouldn't surprise you if that was in his head early on when he went in to make that challenge, maybe just to leave a bit of a mark on him. But look, he got away with it, which was just as well, and he came back on and he did pretty well for the most part. But I thought he was very lucky, Will.
Well, yeah, as to the question of if it was a Fiji player, would it have been different? I think it would have been, because a Fiji player is going to be 2-3 stone heavier, and it's going to be delivered with a lot more force. I think that's my point, I suppose, is that like he is a slider guy, and I didn't think there'd be a huge degree of force. So if Prndergast was playing and comes in the exact same manner, it's not going to be the same collision. That's why I think he was spared, because he's a smaller guy. There wasn't a lot of force in it, whereas the majority of the Fiji players, if not all of them, would be in a similar situation, delivering a lot more power.
But you have to afford the bigger players the same protections as the smaller players, and of course there's a bit of proportionality there. That's obvious. It's not all science here. Like, it's kind of, there's a bit of art there too. There is. No, I do get that point. And like, it felt like it would have been harsh. Like, it's not like he went in to rip him and he didn't follow through on it, but it's just a really bad position to be in. I think you could get your hands up there to stop the person hitting. Do you know what I mean? The cameras are there, so you can kind of see he could have done that one, but he does that one. So, I think that's probably where he loses my sympathy, I think, on it. But look, as I said, glad it didn't mar, his big day out. I think he was, it was very pleasing to see him finish the rest of the game, and I was glad he recovered from it.
I was just thinking when he was sitting there and we were waiting to hear it, I was like, God, if he gets sent off after 10 minutes, the podcast on Tuesday, like the talking points of like Farrell getting rid of Frawley, rolling the dice, Prndergast getting sent off. But as he said, he stayed on. What did you make of his performance, Luke?
I thought he was really good. Like, for his first kind of full start, I'm not even going to bother caveating, because I think that's obvious. I think Fiji were not a real test for him. You know what I mean? They were a test, but not a real test. I think the real test in my mind was how he dealt with kind of managing the team around the place. Did he execute on most of his skills under the bit of pressure that you will have, and did he manage the game well? And I think he did all those things very well. He looks like a real prospect. Obvious thing to say, but important to say it, because I think he's still not ahead in my mind of the other two guys, which I think he might be actually in Farrell's mind. But in my mind, I think he's still another year or so away. I think I've seen loads of progress from him for a guy who hasn't played a massive amount of first-class rugby. And looks like he's definitely one for the future. I think if I was him, I'd be thinking... if it was me picking the team, he's not in the picture next week. I think it's the two guys I think are playing in their provinces, and I think they're playing better for longer than him. And I'd be picking those two guys next week. That said, I think if I was him, I'd be thinking really positively about this window. If that's what Farrell does, and there's a couple of things in this game that straight away I'd be thinking he can improve, but he's got the most important part, is the kind of mental side of things. I think if I was him, I'd be thinking about my strength, building up a bit more kind of muscle mass, getting some more game time with Leinster, working on his pace. I think he can still do that. Sexton wasn't necessarily an unbelievable athlete when he started out, but he had enough pace to trouble defences, and I'd love to see him do work on those things. I think naturally over time he'll get that. He'll get time to do that, because he won't be playing as much rugby in Leinster, because he's competing with Ross Byrne there as well, and Harry Byrne. So I think it's a perfect debut for him. I think it's all laid out for him now to have a brilliant career and be competing with Crowley and Frawley for the next kind of 4 or 5 years.
But like you say, one for the future. I agree with the point that I think Andy Farrell doesn't think of him as one now. Like I expect him to be involved on Saturday. I feel like, why do you pick the team the way you've picked it if not to have him in again on Saturday? That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, but he only covers one position for you, so I think there's a problem for him if he's not starting.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wish there was more in it, but that's how I would expand on that. And I don't think he's better than Jack Crowley.
Yeah, Cian, like what was your perspective on his performance? You know, Rudd, I thought had a good way of putting it, that he said he thought Sam Prendergast had big main character energy, in that like he really kind of he was really kind of inserted into the game in a lot of moments. Obviously, the high tackle was one of them, but you know, his goal kicking was really strong, in particular in the first half, a couple of touchline conversions. Like that, even that first line kick for the opening try, like pins it right onto the 5 metre line. Like that's a skill that I think Irish out halves have been really struggling with. They haven't been getting the most out of those penalty opportunities. A couple of lovely passes. He put Josh van der Fleer through a gap at one stage with a nice pass. It's good handling by Van der Fleer as well, to be fair, to hold onto it. But, you know, what did you see from him? What did you like from him? And what do you think about selection for this weekend? Like, Rick, I'd be surprised if he wasn't in the 23, but maybe I'm just kind of overreading what Andy Farrell has done thus far.
Yeah, I'll swing back to that. I thought he was very good by and large. Look, it's easy to see why there is so much excitement around his potential. And look, I'm sure most listeners and viewers will have seen Sam Prendergast play for the Ireland under-20s, and he was a clear standout player both in the Six Nations and at the World Cup as well. So you can see why Andy Farrell is keen to fast track him into the team. But I agree with what Luke said. I still think Jack Crowley for now is Ireland's first choice 10. What I thought was very impressive from Prndergast is that, look, he was sitting in the bin for, I think it was 5 minutes. I'd say that 5 minutes must have felt like the longest 5 minutes of his life, because if he had been sent off, like, look, it wouldn't have ruined his career by any means, but he always would have had that asterisk next to him that on his first start, his brother Cian was on the bench and he ends up getting sent off. So what do you want to see from a player having gotten the reprieve that he obviously desperately craved? Is that you want to see him put it behind him. So his first action when he comes back on is to kick a restart, a kickoff. Unbelievable kick, a towering restart that Ireland ended up winning back, that led to the first yellow card for Fiji for the prop, which was very good. But then he followed it up by kicking that penalty dead, which I know Ireland felt that it actually didn't go dead. And then he followed it up by kicking another kick out on the full. So there's 2 errors on the back of, you know, getting that yellow card, and you're kind of going, okay, how is he going to mentally recover from this? And I thought, like, everything you hear about him from coaches that have worked with him, players that have played with him, is that he just doesn't seem to get fazed by anything. And for a 21-year-old, I don't think that that's something you can really teach. I think that's innate, and it didn't really seem to faze him at all. I think his super strength is definitely his passing on the gain line. It's some of it is a joy to watch. You touched on the pass to Josh van der Fleer, Will. I thought the one to Bundy Aki in the second half, I put up a clip of it on my Twitter. The slow-mo of that really gives you a good idea of how he's able to manipulate defenders. And then I thought it was really encouraging. Like, Bundy Aki obviously got man of the match. I thought he was brilliant as well. Luke touched on Robbie Henshaw. I thought as a combination they were both excellent, particularly against 2 of probably Fiji's best players who were just nullified in Tuisova and Nai Kalevu. But you could see Aki was loving playing off Prndergast because he trusted him to get the ball into his hands, and like, he seems to spot gaps in the defense that, I don't know, maybe some other 10s might not be able to do. So that's definitely his super strength. I agree with Luke. I think his defense obviously needs a bit of work. I think, you know, you want him to be a threat with ball in hand in terms of maybe taking the ball to the line, going past the defender, which, by the way, Jack Crowley is excellent at, and he took his try really well against Argentina. So all in all, I thought it was very, very encouraging. But I do think Jack Crowley is Ireland's first choice, and that brings me, I suppose, onto your second part of your question, Will, in terms of this weekend. And I'd be more in your camp, I think, than Luke's on this. I would expect Jack Crowley to come back in and start at out half. Look, I think everything that he's done this year, the guy is still only 24. I think, like, people seem to think he's 34 just because a 21-year-old has come on the scene. This is still his first full year as Ireland's first choice out half. He won a Six Nations with the minimum of fuss, you'd have to say, by taking over from Johnny Sexton. So I think everything that he's done across the course of the year, and his first half performance against Argentina, I thought was very good. I know he had a couple of errors in the second half, but Sam Prendergast had several errors as well. But I do agree with you, Will. I think that Andy Farrell is going to probably continue to try and fast track Sam Prendergast here. So it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if he was named on the bench as backup.
I do agree with your point, Cian, about developing a bit of a running threat, because that passing game isn't as effective if the defence knows you're not going to be able
there's a good defence in front of you.
or if you can slip through a gap as well. Like, if they just know you're just going to be standing there passing and you're not going to be like kind of engaging the defenders as well.
I think he's a little over his outside foot for me when he's throwing the pass. So quite similar to Ross Byrne sometimes. So I think that works against teams that are a little bit like if you're on the front foot. And your forwards, the Irish forwards interplay has been a real strength for the last 3 or 4 years, and I think they've gone off the boil the last kind of maybe I'd say even Six Nations, but in the summer as well, and in November I think they haven't been as clean and as crisp. They're making more mistakes there than they normally do. I thought that was a real point of difference for the Irish team, was how good the forwards are, because it meant they were getting like little half breaks and they were getting little bits of momentum, and all of a sudden you're on the front foot. We saw a little bit of that on the weekend. I think they were a little bit better again. Byrne makes a big difference, I think, when he's in the row there, in terms of a ball playing threat and decision maker. But I think that that's one thing I am watching a little bit with him, because it's really easy to throw those passes if you're throwing it, if your body is going with the pass, but it's when you're able to kind of hold the defender in front of you and conserve space against good defenses. That's really important, because oftentimes it's not really a gap that you're putting people through against good teams. Oftentimes it's just giving a good player like Bundy Aki, Gary Ringrose, Hugo Keenan, one of these guys, a one-on-one opportunity to put some footwork on, to put a little bit of pace on, whatever it is, a little bit of deception, and that's, you need to be a running threat yourself, I think, at the top level to be really great at that. I think all the best 10s have that. So if you're passing off your outside foot and you don't really have a big step, or you don't have any of those kind of things, like Johnny Wilkinson did a bit of that. Like, he could throw it off his outside foot, but he also could step off both feet, and he was a threat going through a hole. I haven't seen that yet with Prndergast as much against a good team, but I'm waiting for it. I think he's capable of it. You can see he's got the skills, you can see he's got the brain for it. So that's something I'm watching with him, though, because it's important that he has that skill. If you look at Frawley, actually, Frawley's probably the best of all three at it, at throwing the pass at pace. And I think Crowley as well. Crowley's probably has he's a good running threat, but I still think Frawley's the best running threat out of all three of them, and has a lovely passing. And you see with Leinster this year, he's been really, really strong. So that's one thing that I think he needs to work on. But yeah, no, look, it's certainly it's up in the air. Like, that bench spot for me, I think where you probably falls down versus Frawley is maybe that little bit of versatility. I think I think that's a nice thing to have, and it does depend on the bench composition.
But if you're picking another centre on the bench anyway, like, you have a bit more cover there. Like,
yeah, no, you do. But Frawley can also go fullback, you see, as well. Yeah. And then maybe says
Jack Crowley
could go fullback as well. I was going to say that, but like, I mean, is that what we're doing now? Are we moving Jack Crowley out of that position? And I don't think he's as effective there at 15. I think Frawley actually could be okay there at 15, if I'm being honest. I think he's a bit more of a running threat, and he's bigger than the other two guys. So, yeah, it's up for debate now. Like, I think it's a good place that they're in. I think, the danger is that they end up in the kind of Leinster situation where you're giving a guy, like, we're kind of saying, Crowley can go back to 15. Like, there's that option there. But, like, you don't really want to be unsettling a guy there if he's playing well either, So
one thing this does make me think about, say, like, flash forward to the first game of the Six Nations. Like, what will have taken place in the intervening 4, 5, 6 weeks at Leinster? Like, does Leo Cullen look at this window and feel vindicated that, look, I never trusted Frawley for a reason. Andy Farrell doesn't trust him either. Look, I was right the whole time. Does Leo Cullen go to Sam Prendergast now? Does Leo Cullen...
I think if you looked at the Leinster games this year, Frawley's been one of their best players.
No, he has been. I don't dispute that, but on that basis, Andy Farrell still cut him loose after one bad 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, I think that was really harsh, and I think he loves Prndergast. So, like, look, and that's it. The coach has to go with his gut. Like, at the end of the day, it's his, his neck is on the chopping block too, so you have to go with what you believe, And for whatever reason, like, there's one thing I really didn't like about Frawley on the weekend, is when he threw that sloppy pass into touch. I know it's just maybe it's just a weird reaction, or he was embarrassed or something about it, but he smiled after it, and I was kind of thinking, it doesn't matter whether we're up 45 points. Like, that's a gimme pass. Like, you're an out half that has to go to hand there. And I just thought, if I was a coach, that would really piss me off. That was the one thing I was thinking, That's not a good thing to do. And it was kind of just, a player who's really on it is furious with himself there. And I'm sure he was, but he didn't show it. And I was kind of going, I won't, like if I was in the coaching box, I'm thinking, bad mistake to be smiling up at the camera after or laughing about it, But other than that, I actually thought he had some lovely moments. It's obviously going to be overshadowed when, Prndergast was making the debut, but if you looked at some of Frawley's moments in the game, he had some really nice touches, like some really, really good ones. And as I said, I think the Leinster thing, to me, it counts for something, but maybe to others it doesn't. So,
but I wonder if does it upend the starting order? Like, does Leo Cullen look at it and think
maybe he does?
Yeah,
I wouldn't be. I would not be surprised at that. Like, for whatever reason, Leinster. Like, I think it'd be a mistake because I think he looked really good so far this season. He's got a really big kicking game too. He's a running threat, which they really missed last year in the final. That was the key thing in the final, is that they kind of had a bit of a no running threat off Ross Byrne, really, even though he's a very neat and tidy player. Doesn't have the running threat. Frawley does have it. He's shown this year on a number of occasions for Leinster. I think he's been really, really sharp there, and his passing's been really crisp. But he's got to tighten up his game if he wants that starting jersey. That's why Ross Byrne gets in there, because he's got a game you can rely on for the most part. Now, he doesn't have some things, but what he has, he delivers on fairly consistently. So that's Frawley's big challenge now, because it looks to me like I'd say Prndergast could be consistent for you. There's a few things he doesn't have either, but he's going to get better and better because he's only 21. Whereas Frawley, we kind of know where he's at. To me, the mental part is the key thing for him. And yes, agreed, it is a decision now for Leo when he comes back in. What does he do?
Yeah, because you have 2 Champions Cup games, you have Munster and another Interpro, I think maybe Connacht on New Year's Day, and then you have another 2 Champions Cup games, one of whom is against La Rochelle away from home. So there's a great shop window there for one of them.
What do you think, Cian? Because I think it'd be interesting here, Cian, because I think, like, for me this season for Leo is like, he's just signed the contract, I know, but he's got to win this year. Like, he's got Snyman, he's got Barrett coming in. Like, does he have time to blood Prndergast, or does he say, no, it looks to me like they've kind of picked Frawley, but now what situation is Leo in, do you think?
Jordy Barrett's coming in to play 10.
Yeah. Who knows?
All jokes.
I suggested that in May, I think.
All jokes aside, I think it's a very good point that you make, Luke, in terms of Leo. Like, Leo is under pressure to deliver a trophy for Leinster this season. They've gone all in by bringing in the players that you've mentioned. But yeah, like, I think, Andy Farrell has been shown to be such a good selector that I just don't think you can ignore it. But when it comes around to the Champions Cup, I think Frawley, has done enough certainly to start for Leinster. And I did like the way he dovetailed with Sam Prendergast. They had a really good chemistry in terms of stepping in as first receiver, and it gave Sam Prendergast a bit more space out the back. And Ireland have kind of gone away from that model. It's not something that comes very comfortable to Hugo Keenan. For all that, he's one of the best fullbacks in the world, stepping up and being that playmaker isn't something that he does all that well. And I thought Frawley was excellent in that regard. I do agree with you, Luke. I mean, it was a sloppy enough pass. It wasn't the only one as well. Even the one that Matt Hansen threw for Izuchuku, surely you just put that in the hands. And there was another one as well. Was it Prndergast threw one too? So those kind of errors, I think you really need to tidy up across the board, because Ireland left tries behind them. But to go back to Prndergast, look, I think all good 10s, you want him to have that triple threat. You want him to be able to kick, run and pass. And clearly, like I said, Sam Prendergast's USP is his passing ability. And I think that includes his kicking as well. Obviously, we saw the lovely crossfield kick for Mac Hansen's first try, but kicking, he was very good, astute kicker at under 20 level. We've seen it for Leinster too. But it is that, when you're taking the ball to the line, I think he made one carry in the second half when he came on against Argentina over on the far side, and I think it was Albornoz he came up against the Argentina out half, and like there just wasn't much in the carry. So look, we hardly expect a 21-year-old, and I'm certainly not saying that you guys are making out that, but like, he's a 21-year-old. He has a lot going for him, but he has a lot to get better at as well. He's not going to have it all figured out at 21. I mean, even think back to Johnny Sexton. Was he 24 when he made his Ireland debut? So you can see why there is so much excitement around his potential, but that's still what I think it is. It's potential, but the out half debate it's certainly caused a lot of debate, I think, online, and it's not going to go anytime soon. But look, this is exactly what we want from Irish rugby, is that we want people pushing each other for the jersey. It's a really good place to be.
Yeah, I asked the question not because I necessarily think, or I don't think, that Sam Prendergast should be elevated further and should be starting every game in the Championship Cup. More so that I think Andy Farrell has often set the tone for provincial selections by elevating certain players at national level that haven't really been quite as mapped, like Gibson Park. Yeah, like that's the one. Like then Leinster immediately started playing Gibson Park when like they had like he'd been in the squad for 3 seasons up to that point, I think, or at least 3 seasons up to that point. So like it wouldn't be unheard of for Andy Farrell to make a selection and then all of a sudden it kind of maybe puts a little pressure. You're going to commit?
It's worth pointing out as well. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying, going off the top of my head, that Sam Prendergast started the first game of the season for Leinster, and then pretty much he was whisked off to the Emerging Ireland tour. He started all 3 games over there. With his first game back, I think, again, I'm right in saying he started in that Lions game. Now, I know Frawley played in the meantime, so it's not an exact science. So, look, Leinster have been... Like, Leinster aren't suddenly like waking up and going, oh wow, we have a seriously talented 21-year-old out half on our hands. I think Gibson Park was slightly different. Like, Sam Prendergast has come through the school system, the Irish under-20s, and has been a standout player at every level he played. So I think Leo and Jack Nienarber will be very much aware of that as well.
But the last point I'm making is because like we don't need to jump down this rabbit hole too deeply, but I feel that if Frawley had been the backup throughout this campaign and everything had been as it was going into it, I think it would have been very hard for Leo Cullen to turn around and drop him. But I think Andy Farrell has given Leo Cullen like political cover now. Honestly, it's an election week. I feel like now if Leo Cullen was to drop Frawley for Prndergast,
this backstop,
people would be like, or Leo, and I think people would actually be like, well, Andy Farrell did it, so obviously, you know, it's the right thing to do. Whereas, you know, I think now if Leo Cullen wasn't the fence about him, which it looked like he was, considering that's how he's picked his team over the last couple of years, now he has cover to do so. So I'll be watching that closely.
Not completely wild. Honestly, I swear to God, I can see it, and I can see the narrative. For whatever reason, the narrative, like I feel like Frawley, like he kind of seems to have missed a year or two where he should have been like really pushing, and you know, through injuries and whatever, the coaches didn't think he was able to do it, or whatever the reasoning was. He's in a situation where he needed to, every time he puts on a Leinster, like a blue or a green jersey, he's got to play really solid and be good, like solid to good. And he hasn't always done that. And I think that creates that little bit of, like, it just creates room for coaches to see something different. And to this point in his career, they have seen something different to what maybe I've seen, or what I think personally. Anyway, I've been obviously calling for Frawley for a long time to be in that situation. But I think one thing I would say is Leo, in fairness, does stick to his own guns for a little bit, generally, until maybe he sees the light. That's been the form so far between him and Farrell, isn't it? Like, he's kind of stuck to his guns for a little bit longer maybe than Farrell has. So maybe they view the game slightly differently. But no, Leo's certainly his own man, I think. And I think Frawley served him well this year. I think that'd be harsh. And I think it'd be really harsh that he went into camp into an Ireland team that wasn't playing well, against a team, you know, difficult conditions, against a New Zealand team that were playing pretty good. And he has a bad 20 minutes, and that's it. And like, that would, to my mind, would be madness. And then he doesn't even get to come on at 10 against Fiji. So like, he's not even playing in position. He's playing in a completely different game. It's way looser at fullback. You've less time, like you've less touches on the ball, so all of a sudden you're kind of going, geez, I need to impress. Like, I can see how Frawley does that, where he kind of is forcing things a little bit. It's a little bit looser at fullback because he goes, well, I've got to catch the eye, I'm under pressure here. But there's a skill in that too. Like, a really good player just goes, okay, well, I can do what I can do, and I'm not going to overstretch myself because there's risk in that. So yeah, I don't know.
There was also a moment, like a minute or two, maybe 5 or 10 minutes after he came on, where he threw a pass and got absolutely melted from behind. And I was like, he's injured. Like, you know, he gets I feel like he picks up a lot of knocks like that.
I thought he did well to stay on.
I was thinking like, that's a rib breaker for sure, and I was like, that would be just his luck. Like, he comes on a full back and gets his ribs broken by a pass.
Luke, it's a great point that Luke makes, because like, look, I don't know for sure, we'll probably never know, but I think Sam Prendergast's debut came probably a week earlier than Andy Farrell was planning. I think he was being lined up to play that Fiji game, and they brought it forward by a week earlier. May or not be true, that's just my hunch. But the fact that Frawley didn't get game time, now it was because Prndergast was going so well and all that, and I'm not for a second saying that he should have been taken off, but the fact that Jamie Osborne, who by the way I thought was going very well again at fullback, like, that's a very interesting one, but the fact that Frawley went to fullback and by and large, as we've just discussed, played really well, I think almost hinders his chances of trying to push the debate, certainly from an Irish context, as the 10, because it's just further a reminder of how important his versatility is and how valuable it is.
Yeah, well, we could honestly fill. I probably say this every time, but we could fill easily a full podcast just talking about the out-half debate. But I do want to move on because we'll be talking about it again next week and the week after that and the week after that. There's two areas of the team, guys, that I'd like to get your opinion on as we come to the last game against Australia. And then looking ahead to when Ireland reconvene for the Six Nations. It's kind of like you touched on it earlier, the second row / the six, kind of, how that all fits in. Luke, I'll go to you first. In the summer, in the second test in South Africa when they won, he went McCarthy and Ryan and Byrne at 6. That was the All Black selection as well. Izuchuku comes in at the weekend for his debut. As you said, I agreed with you. I thought he played very well. What's your kind of ideal kind of matching up of those three positions if you're kind of going with your strongest team for this weekend?
Oh, so what's the strongest team? Sorry.
4, 5, 6. Like, what do you...
4, 5 and 6. Okay, so my strongest team would be, it's Byrne, Ryan, McCarthy on the bench, and it is I think I might take a chance on Izuchuku.
That's my thinking as well.
Yeah, I think I might. Like, so if you have a full complement, that's probably a real interesting conversation. I mean, Jack Conan's just back. I think Ireland have really missed Jack Conan.
Is there an argument for him to play this weekend? I know he's not going to, but like,
he's out for too long, I think, Will, isn't he?
But if he's fit to play, he's fit to play.
Yeah, no, it's different. It's a big step up. It is. Yeah,
but like 20 minutes off the bench. I don't know.
Yeah, look,
it's that bench row we discussed where that a bit of oomph.
Well, if you had, so like the one thing I would say is, and I wanted to cover this with you earlier on when you said the Andy Farrell thing. I think Ireland actually do have depth. There's only a few real positions. It's Loosehead is the only one where I'm kind of going, ugh, you'd love a little bit more depth. You'd love someone who's just a little bit younger than Cian Healy. But like, it's not completely untoward for someone that old to be playing that position, by the way. There's loads of people who do it quite well to about 38, 39. I do, and particularly like he's going to be in a bench role for the most part. I do think it looks like you need to have someone that looks that's a little bit closer to Cian. That would be more comforting, I think. But other than that, is there anywhere else on the pitch you're kind of going, Ireland don't have that many good players? I don't think there
Open
is.
side, I think, is a big issue.
But do you, like, because Will Connors is a good player, you know what I mean? I think we've got a few young guys coming through as well. I'm not unbelievably down on that. I think at the moment Josh van der Fleer is still excellent. Peter O'Mahony could do a job for you in there.
No, but Doris if van der Fleer is out, there's no obvious.
But if you have Conan, if you have Baird, if you have Izuchuku, right, on your bench, like you could put Doris in there and you still have some really good, like, powerful runners. Now, you don't want to do that because Doris is probably one of our best players, but you do have options there. I don't think it's as bleak there as is being talked about. I think we actually have lots of depth and power in this team, and I just think they just haven't been playing unbelievably well, if I'm being completely honest.
Well, I don't think, did anyone agree with Andy Farrell? I don't think anyone did.
Did they not? Okay, sorry. I just when you said it, I was kind of thinking,
we discussed it on the show and thought he was completely wrong, I think, was the consensus.
Yeah, I've never felt as
I thought it was a strange thing to say and also an incorrect thing to say. Even if it was right, I thought it was strange, but I actually thought it was wrong.
Yeah, what do you think?
The people who were working with the younger players up and down the country definitely did not agree, let me tell you that. I don't think it went down very well with,
Well, it's kind of a slap in the face to the guys who've been coaching like really successful underage teams and would like to think they're doing a good job and bringing through a lot of players.
A couple of Grand Slams in a row.
And Andy Farrell is saying, like, look, I can't throw these guys in. Like, what do you expect? Like, we're not South Africa. I can see why that would piss off underage coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. But just on the open side thing, I think they missed an opportunity to try someone else out. Even Cian Prendergast, give him a start. I know he doesn't always play 7 for Connacht, but against Fiji last week, similar enough to playing Andrew Porter, Loosehead, because like Lou touched on, that's the other area of concern as well. Because Josh van der Fleer, number one, is so good, but also so durable, we've kind of just sleepwalking our way through this without knowing who is the natural. Because I think there's a bit of square pegs and round holes with trying to get the guys that you've mentioned.
Like what, Doris and O'Mahony and that?
Just a little bit, yeah. Like I wouldn't be moving Doris out of 8, to be honest. I actually think he's been in pretty good form all month as well. And when he was playing 6, I never thought you were getting the best out of him. But yeah, like I think it's a like if Josh van der Fleer gets injured, like what happens? Nick Timoney has gone back to Ulster this week. He didn't get a minute of game time. Yeah. He could have done a job perhaps there as well. There's John Hodnett in Munster, hasn't gotten a look in yet. So there are options there, but for some reason Farrell has been a little slow to, like, let's see what else is out there. And I think the same could be said for Loosehead. You were asking Will about, a couple of positions, and I presume you were going to ask us about that. Sorry if you weren't, but I mean, the Tom O'Toole scenario is like bizarre, really, in my mind, because he's playing tight head for Ulster, and Ireland seemingly want to change him into a loose head. And while, look, it's handy to be able to cover both, we saw the difficulties that he had when he came on at the bench at the weekend. He conceded 2 scrum penalties. So, no different to what's going to happen at the Leinster out half situation. What's going to happen when Tom O'Toole goes back to Ulster next week? He's going to be playing back at tight head. So I was just a little bit surprised, and I'm not saying to have played Cian Healy last week, but Jack Boyle was in training with Leinster for the last few weeks. Now he's gone back to Leinster. I understand he's very young. Maybe they had a look at him and thought, look, he's not quite ready for test rugby, but that Fiji pack, for all that they were big men, it wasn't the most fearsome scrum in the world. And I think there was a little bit of a missed opportunity there, even to start Tom O'Toole, to see how he went and have a Jack Boyle on the bench, because we know what Andrew Porter can do. And when it comes to the big games, when it comes to the opening Six Nations game, Andrew Porter, if he's fit, is going to be asked to play 70 plus minutes, while most other teams are rolling fresh front rows off the bench. So between the loose head and the open side, I think there are 2 positions that we need to be sort of...
Well, can Cian Healy not play 20 minutes for you?
Well, he can, but I just don't know, does he give you the same impact that he would have done a few years ago?
But sure, we're not comparing with that. Like, even at the moment, though, is he like obviously at scrum time, it's locked down because he's got that experience.
Absolutely, yeah. But around the pitch, does he offer much else at this stage? I'm not sure.
Right, yeah, but does he need to? Like, if he's solid at ruck time, if he's and he's neat, a player like him knows the game plan inside out at this stage. He's in the Ireland camp for 15 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, you'd have to think. So, there's loads of people that I always find your pack is split between 2 types of players. You got those kind of impact players, and you got those players who, this is how I think a really ideal pack is. And you got the workers, guys hitting rucks, your Donegal Callahans, these fellas who put in serious. You don't often see them that much, but when you look at the stats after the game, you go, wow, that guy hit 30 rucks. You need that too. Like, for me, Cian Healy could easily do that for 20 minutes.
Is he going to be hitting that many? Like, he is 38, 37.
37, and it's his last. And this is his last season, I suppose. Like, Luke, I'm more looking at what a South Africa, what a France do in terms of rolling off a fresh, young, dynamic pack, front row, I should say. Like, I think you need a little bit more from your bench nowadays than being guaranteed. Like, there is huge value, don't get me wrong, and Cian Healy being able to lock out a scrum if you're under pressure in the last minute. But for me, I think we need to be looking at a little bit more. He's already said that this is probably going to be his last season, and that's why I would have liked to have seen maybe a Jack Boyle get 20 minutes off the bench.
That's fair.
It's also what it does to Andrew Porter, like playing 70.
No, my point is that you don't. Sorry, that was probably my biggest point, is that I don't think they need to be doing that.
Yeah,
and I think it's bad for Porter.
Exactly. Like, is there? I don't maybe obviously they have the stats on his energy, but there's probably an unquantifiable thing that you of chipping away by point.
That is a serious stress on your body.
Yeah,
no matter
exactly.
who you are. So Porter is a giant of a man, loads of muscle mass, all that kind of stuff. But your spine doesn't change that much in size, and you think of the pressure going through and the hips and all that kind of stuff in rucks and all that. I think there's an argument to say they need to manage him. That was probably my bigger point, lads. Not necessarily that I think, because in fairness, I did say, I think you'd like to see someone who's a bit more developed behind Cian Healy, certainly closer to where Cian Healy is now. But I still think they're probably overdoing it with Porter. I think they should be changing him a little bit earlier.
And, fatigue contributes to giving away penalties. Porter does give away quite a lot of penalties.
Not always at the end of the match, Will.
That's true.
For being honest.
A lot of them are probably. Yeah. I'm actually thinking now. Maybe it's the first quarter. He comes into it tired from the previous.
It's a good point, Will, because that amount of stress that he takes on his body every time he comes, just for the pure nature of the position that he plays in. I mean, you want Andrew Porter to have a long and successful Ireland career, not look at Cian Healy, still going at 37. And I know he played a savage amount of minutes when he was younger. They're very similar in terms of how freakish they were coming through, but you would hope that it's not going to take a year or two off Andrew Porter's career at the back end because they're playing him so much now. But look, there are guys working in the Ireland system, like sports scientists, whatever, who were paid a lot of money to monitor these kind of things.
Well, the Cian Healy comparison is good because there was a similar chasm between Cian Healy and the replacements behind him. I think was it Tom Quarter, maybe back in the day, or Tony Buckley, or I'm trying to remember who.
No, Tony played tight head. No, but I think. There was
but he ended up getting a lot of injuries.
Kilcoyne got a good bit of time. He was actually, in fairness, very powerful, but probably not the same at scrum time, I don't think, as Cian maybe at that point in his career. But around the pitch, he was brilliant. You know what I mean? So there was different guys around at different times who were able to kind of step in for Cian. But Cian, I thought, was so far ahead. There was, I would say, was there 4 or 5 years where he was probably the best loosehead in the world? You know what I mean? So are we going to be producing two people as
But
close.
the
probably
injuries
not.
did start to catch up with him.
Well, that's because he probably started so young. Like if you think so,
Porter's been in the team from 21
Cian
as well.
Cian does things. His shape, so he looks more similar to Porter now. But if you think about Cian Healy when he started off, we're going off on a real tangent here. But he was like an elastic band. Like the guy could have. I remember seeing the guy doing backflips. Like when we were 15. I remember we were 16 or 17 playing Ireland schools. Like the guy could do backflips. Like Porter's never been able to do a backflip. Brilliant athlete, but Cian Healy is. Do you remember? Even remember
now
against
judging
Claremont,
the
like,
Irish Lucets on their back.
No, I'm just saying he's a
ability.
different body type than him. Do you know what I mean? Like Porter is more like a prop, like he's a super strong guy. But there's not that much similarity in terms of the power like Cian Healy can put through. Porter's just so unbelievably strong, powerful guy. But Cian has this weird like flexibility and stuff. So he was always probably more prone to getting injuries because he found himself in like more awkward positions than Porter. Personal opinion, and we're in a weird topic area, but I just wanted to like he's such a brilliant athlete. We don't produce a Cian Healy nearly ever in this country. Like that guy probably could have been in the Olympics in some kind of shot put or something like that.
Sort of backflipping.
Well, I promise you, if you trained with Cian in the gym, you'd be he was astonishing in the gym. Now Porter lifts unbelievable weights. Cian did that too, but the way Cian Healy moves, like the guy could sidestep, and he was 18 and a half, 19 stone, over 30 yards. The guy's rapid. Like Porter doesn't have that side of things, but he's a super athlete. I'm not gonna. They're just different, is the point I'm making.
We should give Cian Healy a shout out as well, because it looks like he'll probably break Brian O'Driscoll's record, which he equaled a couple of weeks ago, if he plays this week, which it sounds like he might be on the bench. So that would be an unbelievable achievement. And look, I know I said there, like kind of what's he offering at this stage of his career, but that's not to take from what he has done across the course of his career. He has he's set the ground for Andrew Porter. Like he redefined what a Lucet I think was, and like he's been an unbelievable servant to Irish rugby.
Yeah, like our first ballot Hall of Famers, they would say, in the NFL.
Absolute.
I'm not sure if there is a Hall of
Legend
Fame over here. Maybe there is.
But like as unusual an athlete he was,
Yeah.
he's the same kind of in terms of like an individual to get to know. Like one of the all-time great guys that you meet, and only like one of a kind. Like I remember being in his house in the back garden, like, and you could be shooting an archer. Like he'd have bows, he'd have barbecues, all this kind of, like he's such a good personality, brilliant painter, makes knives and all this kind of stuff at the back. Like he's such a talented fella. So he's one of a kind. I think he'd be missed 100%. Like a great guy in the setup too, very well liked, like by every generation he's been in. So yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned him, because I love talking about him. He's such an interesting bloke, actually.
Yeah, well, as Cian said, he'll be probably breaking the record for most Irish caps this weekend, so it'll be some achievement. Cian, obviously the Joe Schmidt factor on Saturday. It'll be interesting having him back. Are you looking forward to going back into a Joe Schmidt press conference? It's been a while.
Yeah, it'll be good to see our good friend Joe. Yeah, like it was disappointing, I think, that they lost and they were so poor at the weekend, because obviously they were going for the
Really took the
clean
sting
sweep.
out of it, didn't it? Like it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm kind of going to take a half glass full approach to that and hope that they have still something left in the tank, because they looked a little leggy and tired at the end of a long year. And look, I think as a whole, I think the job that Joe Schmidt has done has been remarkable, really, because when I was watching them in the rugby championship, particularly in that defeat to Argentina, the heavy defeat, I was honestly wondering if he had bitten off more than he can chew. And I wonder, he'd never admitted publicly, but I wonder if he was having any kind of similar doubts in his head. And you look at the job that he's done since. So I think it gives you huge encouragement in terms of what's to come next year with the Lions tour. They've obviously got their home World Cup in 2027. Now, Joe Schmidt is only contracted until the Lions tour, is my understanding. So I think the Australian Union are going to try and move heaven and earth to try and get him to stay on. It'd be absolutely madness if they didn't, particularly again with that home World Cup. But it's like, when you kind of stop and think about it, it's no surprise really the improvements he has made. They were starting at such a low base from the disastrous tenure of Eddie Jones, and I think even you look at the form of some of the players like Tom Wright at fullback, Len Ikitau in the centre, guys who Eddie Jones just didn't seem to rate at all, and Joe Schmidt is really getting the best out of them. So I think regardless of the result this weekend, I think as a whole, I think Australian rugby will be really encouraged by what they've seen in the first kind of few months of Joe Schmidt in charge, and it really does kind of add a bit more oomph, I think, to the Lions tour next year, because it was looking like it could be a potential whitewash.
But what's pretty mad about the schedule is that, like, after this game, the next block of matches will be the Leinster for Australia. Like, he doesn't have a rugby championship to go before on. They'll get a friendly or two in maybe against Samoa or Tonga just to warm them up, but it will be the Leinster. They'll have to like hit the ground running in the Test series because the rugby championship is after the Leinster.
God, I honestly hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, so like he's almost had to like he has so little time to get this team together. Like, he had the rugby championship, whereas as Cian said, like it was very much betting in. I suppose he had the 2 games against Wales and one against Georgia as well before that, but really feeling his way in. And now this is kind of like he has to know his team basically. It's a very tall order.
It's an absolute nightmare.
It is, yeah. The rugby championship coming.
They'll get games somewhere.
No, but it's having 2 warm-up friendlies is not the same as having a rugby championship to battle harden yourself.
Yeah.
And then you'd love to have the Leinster maybe after that if the schedule allows, but it doesn't. It wasn't really a question, it's a statement, I suppose. But I
suppose the Lions are only playing, like, I know they'll have the warm-up games and stuff. They're playing Argentina and Dublin, but I think Joe will have them in good shape. Whether it's good enough to win a series, obviously that remains to be seen. But from where we were, Will, in the Rugby Championship, I think it looks altogether more positive now for Australian rugby.
Yeah, it's interesting because like they did just beat a terrible Wales team and an England team who were kind of in disarray. So like the Scotland game, to me, I was slightly concerned because I was
harsh on England. They're not in complete disarray. Did
I say complete?
No, sorry. You said they're in disarray.
I did slight disarray. Yeah. Well, sorry. Look, England are in a place where it's a little jumbled. You know, certainly they
haven't got the results. Certainly,
they haven't got the results.
Should have beaten the All Blacks.
No, they're playing better than the results. But the Scotland game, they were a good bit off it. So like, this is actually a big test as well. Like, if they don't go well on Saturday, all of a sudden I'd look at it as more of a glass half empty. Notwithstanding what Cian said, because they did have some positives in the first 2 weeks, but also, like, if they can go to Ireland and put it up to Ireland and win or come close to winning, that would really be a check mark to me that they're going in the right direction towards the line.
Oh yes, sir. No, definitely. And if it's a tight game, like I think that Ireland are very difficult to beat at home. Like, even how badly they played against New Zealand,
they weren't out of it.
They weren't out of the game. You know what I mean? Like, and that was the worst Irish performance, in a very, very long time. So, difficult place to go and play. But I think Joe is kind of he's kind of built for these ones. And I think it'll be probably a little bit easier for him, I think, to prepare for Ireland. Weirdly enough, as that sounds, than it is for Scotland. Scotland are just generally a little bit looser. I think they do well in games where, like, say, they're down 10 points and you think of the big Scotland performances, they don't generally do well against like kind of teams that are very organised, very, comfortable with the game. But you think like, Ireland, they have a terrible record. South Africa, they generally do pretty terrible against. Do you know what I mean? Not that they're unbelievably similar, but France, they don't have a great record either. They're kind of patchy, they can, I think, as loose as Australia are, I think that suits Scotland, if you get me. Whereas this one, I think, is probably a bit easier for Joe to prepare. They're like not exactly a like for like, and it'll have to be a bit tighter. And some of Joe's real quality, I think, will come through against Ireland in terms of how creative he can be. The key thing for them is that they're not as bad defensively and they're not as loose on the kind of penalty count. He's generally really good at getting his teams good at those two things. I think he's managed against Ireland when they were playing better. That New Zealand performance, I think his fingerprints were all over that. And I think there's loads you can take from that to play against this Ireland team. I expect them to go better, actually, and to bounce back. It's the last match of the tour for them as well. I think they'll be able to have one last effort. I think the little bit of tiredness and legginess that we saw against Scotland, or whatever you want to call it, I don't think they'll be as flat this weekend, and I think they'll be up for this one.
I also thought it was hilarious that the Australian bus was snowed in one day and they couldn't go to training. Just after the bus incident in 2017 when Schmidt wouldn't stop talking about it.
What is it about Scotland?
The effing bus. I enjoyed that very much. And Cian, one thing I'm interested to see this weekend is kind of like Joe Schmidt knowing Ireland so well, and I agree with Luke, doing such a number on Ireland in that quarter final, what areas he thinks he can attack Ireland in and what areas Australia go after. Obviously every coach has a game plan to attack the opposition, but for some reason with Schmidt in particular, I'm just extra fascinated to see what specifically he tries to do to beat Ireland.
Yeah, look, as narratives go, like, I don't think it could be better set up this weekend. It's Andy Farrell's last game before he takes his Lions sabbatical. There's no way he's going to want to lose to Joe Schmidt, whatever psychological advantage that could give him ahead of next year. But you're so right, Will. I think the I think the Autumn Nations series on a whole has been brilliant. I think the rugby has been really, really entertaining. Definitely one of the better Novembers that I can remember. And I think this is a really perfect way to finish it off. For the couple of reasons that I mentioned and what you just said there, Will. Because look, Andy Farrell is going to go away after this week, and he's going to click into Lions mode, and it's going to be up to Simon Easterby to take it on to the Six Nations. And what better game and coach to pick out whatever holes might exist in the game plan than Joe Schmidt? I mean, the try that the All Blacks scored in the quarterfinal off the line out will just always be etched in my memory because, like Luke said there, Joe Schmidt's fingerprints were all over it. And I presume that try is certainly something that he's talking about. That was just a classic Joe Schmidt power play. I was out at the press conference today talking to a few of the players, and like they were saying, and I'm sure you were the same, Luke, that there was times when he'd come in and he would, he'd run a play and you'd kind of go, wow, we haven't seen that before. So like Ireland are fully bracing themselves for the unexpected. Like they've been in this situation so often where he's designed intricate set piece moves for particular opposition. Like I said, he did it for the All Blacks last year, so I would say he'll have something up his sleeve as well. And I just don't think it could be better set up. It's such a great way for, I think, Ireland to round off the year 2024, and for Australia as well. Like with the Lions narrative, Farrell's last game, Joe Schmidt coming back to Dublin for the first time as a head coach. I genuinely cannot wait for it.
And it really rounds off his year. I think there's something in that. This Aussie team, if they can get a win here, I think mentally it puts them in a very different place going into the tour next year, because I think there'll be quite a few Irish players on that Lions tour as well. I still think they're probably the best of the home nations by a bit, not by a massive amount. I think England are closing the gap a little bit, but Ireland are still the best team of the home nations, and they make up the majority of the Lions squad, I think. And if you get a win away in Dublin, like what does that do for your head coming into the game the next time? I think that makes a big difference,
Do you know what's funny? We've talked a lot about Andy Farrell's Lions sabbatical. I'm actually very surprised we haven't engaged in any kind of crystal balling around the squad. I don't think literally once we've mentioned, so-and-so could be in the Lions squad.
There's been so many other little...
Is it too early? Because usually...
We did one, didn't we?
Sorry, no, we did one last summer, but I'm surprised it's been a new season. I'm surprised we haven't spent like a full show speculating as to who. I've almost forgotten that there's a squad.
What have we discovered here? This will be every week now, Cian. It's fine for you. You get to come in and out. I've got to deal with this every week.
Lions watch.
If there's one thing we, the three of us, don't need when we're on together on this podcast, it's another rabbit hole.
I know.
How we ended up talking about Luke watching
Cian Healy backflipping.
I know. Yeah.
That was completely my fault. I take full responsibility for that.
Well, look, I won't open up too many more talking points. Just to get a quick prediction from both of you, I'll go to you, Luke, first. Like, how do you envisage Saturday going? Like, what will we be talking about next Tuesday?
Love to know a little bit more weather, etc., because I think it'll impact the Wallaby. They can be loose enough at times, but I'm going to assume it's decent weather, and I think they'll go well. I think the Aussies will go well, but I think Ireland will go well too, and I think it's going to be maybe 8 or 9 points. I think Ireland win it. They're comfortable. They're more than a try ahead or converted try ahead at the end of the game, but I think Schmidt gives them enough trouble in certain areas of the game. He'll have his focus on areas that Ireland haven't been great on, at ruck time, I think penalties, things like that. I think he'll have the Aussies relatively tight and organised in that respect, and hopefully they get the defence right, and maybe one or two little cool, intricate kind of set plays that maybe
special.
Yeah, to pick maybe the Ireland defence apart and makes it a little bit of a tight affair. So I'm going Ireland by 8 or 9 points, I think. Yeah,
Cian, what do you think? I suppose I do think Ireland will win the game, but I'm just intrigued to see whether we get a performance, whether we see a performance that's kind of closer to the Ireland we kind of expect when they're really at their best. Like obviously Fiji was Fiji, but a performance level kind of somewhat akin to that, but against a lot better team, would kind of put to bed maybe the talk of a decline, a slump going into a Six Nations where the head coach will be gone and it'll be kind of a little tweaked and a little different.
They should get better, Cian, shouldn't they? Like the fourth game in, like even if they did change a little bit, like it does make a difference being together for that long, I think. I don't know, do you think the same thing?
Absolutely. Sure. All you have to do is look at the progression that Ireland have made across the course of the 3 games that they've already played. Poor against the All Blacks. Very good for the first half against Argentina. And last week, for all the caveats that we've mentioned, but it was their most complete 80-minute performance. And I think the young guys who came in and played very well, like we've already discussed it, I think that will light a fire under the more experienced guys now who come back in this week, because they're going to want to obviously make a statement. It's the last, opportunity to work directly with Andy Farrell before he, picks his Lion squad. I know that's months away, but it is the last time they get to work with him directly. So I am expecting a big Ireland performance, I have to admit. Like I said, I think Australia looked a little bit leggy. Joseph Swahili, I really hope he's playing from even a neutral point of view to get to watch him. It sounds like he might be in the mix, but I think Will Skelton has gone back to La Rochelle.
That's a real pity. Oh yeah, you want Skelton there, yeah.
Of course, and like it is worth pointing out for anyone who doesn't know that this game is being played outside of the international window, but because the Irish players are all contracted to the IRFU, there's no such issues with them all playing because
first game. That's so annoying.
Yeah, because it is kind of strange that the URC is on this weekend as well. We're not used to kind of having that at all. But I
mentioned that. Mind not mentioning the Lions. Just mention URC.
We chatted plenty of.
We'll have plenty of URC to go. Sorry, yeah.
Ireland, like before the teams have even been named, like Ireland are 14-point favourites, and to me
it was 17 2 days ago. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, like I think it sounds about right. I think
really?
Ireland could. Yeah, I think Ireland could. I think if Ireland pitch up and play well, even allowing for a Joe Schmidt special or two, I think Ireland, because they haven't, with their full first choice team, they haven't delivered anything close to an 80-minute performance yet. Andy Farrell leaving and all that, I think they're due a big one, and I think they'll get it this weekend. And I don't think, like, for all the improvements that Australia have made, and they have made significant improvements, I think this Ireland team are in a far different place. They're much further down the road than they are. So I'd imagine a good win.
Your prediction dovetails nicely with the start when I said the vibes are back in a good place. The Fiji game was kind of like an exorcism. Like, maybe not that an exorcism was necessary. A small slight exorcism of the bad vibes.
What do you think, Will?
I think it will be maybe a 10 to 12 point win, and they'll play well. And I think Australia will be better than they were last week. And I think with Joe Schmidt there, will be closer. Even though Ireland might play quite well, I expect Australia not to get beaten like out the gate. Like, the handicap is very, very big. Also depends on who's available. Suoli will be a good addition. Skelton's a big loss. But I've been impressed with what I've seen from some of them guys in November. I still think they're missing a really good out half. Like, I don't think Lescio is.
He's okay though.
He's only okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Rob Valentini in the back row is
great player. Yeah, really good player. So they don't.
Suoli is the star though.
Yeah,
I want to see some magic. Like, that'd be a nice way to finish it off. And I think, like, the one thing I'd say is I think Australia need to be playing like a super. Like, if they have a potential superstar, they need eyeballs on them.
Yeah.
Don't they? Like,
especially
just struggling for numbers.
A guy who
will
probably draw in some fans from rugby league, you presume, as well, who will be familiar with them, because I don't know how many of them would really want to watch Union that often other than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, set up to be a great game this Saturday, Ireland versus Australia, as Joe Schmidt returns to the Aviva Stadium. Cian, Rudd and Sinead will be at the ground on Saturday with a podcast looking back on the game, and then next Tuesday myself and Luke will break it all down. Until next time, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.